A black single dad fixed the CEO's computer. Her secret photo made her whisper, "Do you think I'm pretty?" Jerome Hawley never imagined his morning would lead him to the top of the building, the floor where only the highest-level executives walked. Most days he spent his time repairing keyboards, reconnecting cables, and helping nervous employees who feared their computers more than their deadlines. He liked staying unnoticed. It kept life simple, and simple was all he could afford as a single father raising his daughter, Lonnie. But at 9:12 a.m., a request appeared on his device that made him blink twice. Priority level, CEO office. System failure. Jerome stared at the screen. The CEO never called IT directly. Her team usually filtered every message before it reached the technicians. He wondered if it had been a mistake, but the ticket was marked urgent and his name was assigned. He took a slow breath and lifted his toolkit. The elevator ride felt different today, like each passing floor tightened something inside his chest. The lights reflected off the metal walls as the numbers climbed higher. 34, 35, 36. His heartbeat matched the rhythm. By the time the doors opened on the 42nd floor, the building felt quieter, heavier. The air smelled faintly like expensive perfume and polished wood. The carpets were darker here, softer under his shoes. Sunlight poured in through tall windows, flooding the hallway in warm gold. A receptionist with silver glasses acknowledged him with a nod. "You're the technician?" "Yes," he answered, trying not to sound nervous. "She's waiting." "Last office, straight ahead." Jerome thanked her and started walking. He felt out of place, like someone had dropped him into a world where nothing belonged to him, not the silence, not the office art, not the view of the city stretching wide outside the glass walls. When he reached the open doorway, he paused. Alina Sterling, the CEO, stood alone inside her office, reading something on her phone. She was known for being strict, detailed, and always 5 steps ahead of everyone else. But from the doorway, she didn't look intimidating. She looked tired, maybe, or deep in thought. He knocked lightly on the doorframe. "Ma'am? I'm here to look at your system." She lifted her head, and for a brief moment, her expression softened. "Yes, come in," she said, pointing toward her desk. "The whole system froze during a review. I need it running before my next meeting." Jerome stepped forward carefully. Her office felt like a world of its own, quiet, clean, filled with sunlight and untouched paperwork. 3 large monitors sat on her desk, all stuck on a login loop. He set his toolkit down and began working, focusing on the cables and ports. His hands usually worked with steady confidence, but here, with the CEO just a few steps away, every small movement felt louder. As he restarted the system, something unexpected happened. A faint image flashed across one of the screens, so fast he almost thought he imagined it. A photo of Alina, but not the woman standing behind him. No suit, no sharp expression. Just a simple picture of her smiling in a way he had never seen her smile. It was warm, soft, like someone who finally felt safe. Jerome immediately looked away, pretending nothing had happened. It was private. He didn't want trouble. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable. But she had already noticed the change in his breath. "What showed up?" she asked quietly. Jerome froze. "Just part of the reboot sequence, ma'am. Nothing important." She took a few steps closer. He could feel her presence now, not heavy, but fragile in a way he didn't expect. She looked down at the desk, then at him. "That picture," she said softly. "You saw it, didn't you?" He didn't answer at first. His instinct was to protect his job. But something in her voice, something unsure, made him lift his eyes. "I only saw it for a second," he said carefully. "And I didn't mean to." She didn't scold him. She didn't straighten her shoulders in authority. Instead, she stood very still, as if deciding whether to say something she'd kept buried for too long. "Jerome," she whispered. He looked up again. She wasn't the CEO in that moment. She was a woman standing alone in a quiet office, trying to ask a question she wasn't used to asking anyone. Her voice trembled just barely as she spoke. Do you think I'm pretty? Jerome felt the question hit him like a soft, unexpected wave. There was no arrogance in her tone, no flirtation, no power. Just vulnerability, raw, honest, and completely out of place in a room built for strength. He didn't know what answer she was hoping for. He didn't know why someone as powerful as her would care what he thought. But he knew this moment mattered more than the system he was fixing, more than any job he'd ever done. And whatever he said next would change everything between them. For a long moment, Jerome didn't speak. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because he had never been asked something so personal by someone so far above his world. He could feel the weight of her question hanging in the room, soft but heavy, like a breath that hadn't been released. Alina Sterling waited with her arms loosely crossed over her chest, not defensively, but nervously. Jerome had never imagined the CEO could feel nervous about anything. She was the type of woman who walked through the building with calm confidence, the kind of confidence that made every employee straighten their backs when she passed. But now she stood only a few feet away, not as a CEO, but as a woman unsure of her own reflection. Jerome cleared his throat gently. "Ma'am, I think you're asking the wrong person." Her eyebrows pulled together slightly. "Why would you say that?" "Because I'm just IT," he answered softly. "Most people don't even notice I'm here." "That's exactly why I'm asking you," she said, taking one slow breath. "You don't have a reason to lie to me." Jerome looked at her for a moment, really looked at her. Not the polished exterior she showed the world, but the tiredness under her eyes, the slight shake in her hands, the loneliness he sensed beneath her calm voice. She reminded him of someone trying to hold together a life everyone assumed was perfect. He finally spoke, his voice warm and steady. "Yes, you're pretty, but I think you already know that. The real question is why you don't feel it." She blinked, surprised by the honesty. Most people never spoke to her that way. Most people only told her what she wanted to hear, or what they feared she needed to hear. Jerome returned to his work, giving her room to recover from the moment. He knew he had stepped into a part of her life he wasn't supposed to see, and he didn't want to make her regret asking. The computer finished rebooting. He checked the diagnostics, making sure the system was stable. "You'll be able to use it now," he said gently. "But I'll run a full scan to make sure it doesn't freeze again." Alina nodded but didn't move back to her desk. She stayed close, her voice quiet. "How long does a full scan take?" "About 10 minutes, then." "Stay until it's done," she said. It didn't sound like an order. It sounded like a request from someone who didn't want to be left alone with her thoughts. Jerome nodded and stepped aside, giving her space. Alina stood by the window, arms at her sides. She didn't look powerful now. She looked human. Someone who had spent too long pretending she didn't need anybody. "Do people ever ask you personal questions at work?" she asked suddenly. Jerome shook his head. "Not really. Most of the time I'm invisible." "That's not fair," she murmured. "It's okay," he replied. "It makes my job easier." Alina turned to him again. "Do you like working here, honestly?" He hesitated. No one at her level had ever asked him anything about his life, let alone how he felt about his job. "I like the routine," he said, "and it pays the bills. I have a daughter, so stability matters more than anything else." Her expression softened with genuine interest. "You have a daughter?" "Yes, her name is Lonnie. She's 9, smart, funny, stubborn." A small smile formed on his face. "She loves drawing." "And pancakes." "Lots of pancakes." A faint laugh escaped Alina, surprising both of them. "She sounds sweet." "She is," Jerome said proudly. The scan reached halfway. The room fell quiet again, but this silence felt different, warmer, less tense. Alina walked toward her desk and rested her fingertips lightly on the edge of it. "You know," she said softly, "everyone thinks I have this perfect life. Big office, big salary, big decisions. But no one ever sees what I gave up to get here." Jerome didn't interrupt. He knew people never shared this kind of truth unless they really needed to let it out. I haven't asked anyone that question in years, she admitted. I didn't realize until today how strange it feels to want someone's honest opinion. Jerome looked up at her. Sometimes being powerful makes people forget you have feelings too. She stared at him for a moment, almost as if she wasn't used to being understood. Just then, the system beeped scan complete. He disconnected the cables and stood up. Everything is fixed, he said gently. You should be good to go. Alina nodded slowly, but she didn't look relieved. She looked like someone afraid this small moment of connection was about to end. Jerome, she said again more softly this time. Thank you. Not just for the computer. He smiled politely, not wanting to cross any unspoken line. You're welcome, ma'am. He picked up his toolkit and walked to the door. But before he stepped out, she spoke again. Would you come back later? There's another system I want you to check. He knew there was no second system. Still, he turned and nodded. Yes, ma'am. Just call me. And for the first time since he'd started that job. The CEO smiled at him, a small smile, but real. Very real. Jerome spent the rest of the afternoon working on routine repairs across different floors, but his mind kept drifting back to the CEO's office, specifically to the moment she had asked him that fragile question. He had replayed it so many times that he began to wonder if he had imagined the softness in her voice, or the small, real smile she gave him before he left. By the time the clock hit 3:45 p.m., he was finishing up another service ticket when his device buzzed. System check requested, Office 42F. Jerome stared at the message. There was no description, no error code, just a location, Alina's office. He closed his toolbox and took a slow breath. He wasn't nervous this time, just curious. Something about the energy in her office earlier had stayed with him longer than it should have. He didn't know why she wanted him back, but he also didn't feel like saying no. As he entered the elevator, he wondered what Lonnie was doing at school. She would be waiting for him by 5 o'clock. He still had plenty of time, but he hoped whatever Alina needed wouldn't take long. The 42nd floor was quieter than before, almost empty now. The receptionist had left, and the lights were slightly dimmer as the workday wound down. Jerome walked toward her office and found the door partly open. He knocked once. Ma'am? Come in, she said softly. Alina sat at her desk, not typing, not reading, just sitting there with her hands folded loosely in front of her. It was the first time Jerome saw her without her usual controlled posture. She looked relaxed, almost thoughtful. There's no real system issue, she admitted before he could speak. I just wanted to ask you something else. Jerome set his toolkit aside and waited, unsure where this conversation might go. She inhaled slowly. When you said earlier that I was asking the wrong person, what did you mean? Jerome thought for a moment. I meant, you don't realize how much people see you differently from how you see yourself. Sometimes the person closest to the problem isn't the best person to judge it. Alina nodded, processing his words. And what about you? How do you see me? He swallowed. He wasn't too used to conversations like these, especially with someone powerful enough to change an entire company with a signature. You seem strong, he said carefully, but also lonely, like you've spent a long time trying to hold everything together by yourself. She didn't react with offense or anger. Instead, her eyes softened. You're more observant than most people who sit across from me, she said quietly. Jerome shook his head. I don't think you let many people sit across from you. That made her smile, not the polished CEO smile, but a small, honest one that reached her eyes. Maybe you're right, she said. A long silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like two people standing at the edge of something unnamed, something they didn't expect, but couldn't ignore. Alina leaned back slightly. Do you ever wish life had turned out differently for you? Jerome wasn't expecting such a personal question. Everyone does, I guess. But I have Lonnie. She's my whole world. Whatever I didn't get in life, she makes up for it. She's lucky to have you, Alina said softly. Jerome looked at her. surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "I try my best." Another moment passed. Outside the window, the city glowed in soft light as the sun began its slow descent. The office felt warm, almost cozy, which was strange considering how large it was. Alina finally broke the silence. "Most people see me as someone who doesn't need anything from anyone. But the truth is, I don't remember the last time I asked someone for something real." Jerome didn't answer. He sensed she wasn't finished. "The picture you saw earlier," she continued, "was from a long time ago before I took this job. Before I stopped being someone who smiled without thinking." Jerome listened quietly. "That version of me feels like a stranger now," she admitted. "And I didn't realize how much I missed her until today." Jerome spoke softly. "You're still that person somewhere. Maybe you just forgot." Her eyes met his, and something warm flickered there, something she hadn't shown anyone in years. "Why is it easier to talk to you than to the people I see every day?" she asked. Jerome smiled a little. "Maybe because I don't expect anything from you. I just listen." Alina held his gaze for a long moment, almost as if she was trying to understand why this man this quiet, simple IT technician felt safer to her than anyone else in her world. Finally, she sighed. "Jerome, would it be strange if I asked you one more personal question?" "Depends on the question," he said gently. She hesitated, then looked down at her hands. "Do you think I've changed so much that I can't go back to who I was?" Jerome stepped closer, not too close, just enough that she felt supported. "No," he said softly. "I think you're just waiting for the right moment, and the right person, to remind you." Before she could speak, the building intercom came on, announcing the end of the executive workday. The moment broke, but not completely. Alina exhaled slowly. "Thank you for coming back," Jerome nodded. "Anytime, ma'am." He started to leave, but before he reached the door, she called after him. "Jerome?" He turned. "Will you be here tomorrow?" He smiled. "If you need me." Her expression softened again. "I think I might."